Welcome to my channel. This is the first time I've ever torn one of these apart, and the intention is to rebuild an 02A into an 02C all-wheel drive transmission. So follow along as I mess this up a lot. So everything is happening first time around. I'm not doing anything that I've done before. So let's see what happens. I'm going to go ahead and start taking stuff apart. You'll see all the tools. I'll show all my tools as I go that I've gleaned from the internet, and I'll also show you I've got a Bentley manual. It's the old B4 Passat volume 2. It's a 2-volume manual, and it's in the second manual. It's got all the stuff that for gaps for your synchronizers and disassembly and assembly instructions and torque values. Yeah, it's gonna be a lot of fun. So what you're currently looking at is a transmission I just pulled out of the pick and pull this morning. Came out of a 97 TDI B4 sedan. It is a CTN transmission, so it's the TDI gears I need. You'll see all the other fun stuff I got going on, but this is the dirty part. Yeah, let's jump right into it. Oh, and don't mind that shifter. I yanked that out of a 02M transmission, so I use an 02M shifter instead of the old style shifter. But yeah, let's jump right in. Alright, now I did take these bolts off before just to see what was in here, because I didn't know what size Torx bit I needed. So I looked at it and then looked it up on the internet and found out all kinds of fun information. And please don't ever work on a transmission without wearing gloves. It's disgusting, and your wife will hate you. Or girlfriend or boyfriend, or, you know, whatever. The windshield that this car came out of, somebody scratched 260,000 miles on it. So if this thing does have 260,000 miles on it, it's probably got a lot of wear, but I'm going to find out. Alright, so what you're looking at right now is the 5th gear assembly, and this is what I had to research. This is a T60 Torx bit, and I also got some cheap pullers from the Advanced Auto Parts and O'Reilly. Wow, that looks pretty cool. I'm gonna go get some rags. All right. Okay, so I got this from Advanced Auto Parts. It's Toolkit AC 1025. It has all your Torx bits in it, and it goes all the way up to T60, which is what I need. See if it fits. And look at that, it does. Cool. Go get a breaker bar. Alright, got all my tools put together here. So the Bentley manual says to remove the 5th gear shift fork. So I'm going to do that using an 8mm triple square. This is the same one you use for CV axle bolts. Okay, they're not very tight. Cool. Oh, it actually says remove 5th gear shift fork. Okay. Then the next step is to remove these big ass bolts. Oh, look at that. So these little doodads just pop right out. They slide right out. Okay, we're in neutral still. You know if you're in neutral because it can go up and down freely like that. And then this just pops out, I guess. Look at that. Slides right out. Kind of leave that together so I don't lose all the little bits. Now I have to take these things off. Okay, now there is a tutorial on Vortex that explains how to do this, but they don't explain all the way because they didn't say what to do to get the gears to lock up. But the information's out there, and it's in the Bentley as well. Bentley is not going to lead you wrong, down the wrong path. So essentially what we're going to do is we're going to manually shift this thing into two different gears at the same time. That way one binds against the other so I can beat the hell out of these bolts and hopefully they come out. So let's see what happens. And the little procedure is in the Bentley manual, once again, with nice pictures. So it says push in and counterclockwise on the shifter. And then push down on the 5th gear slider sleeve thingamajig, whatever the hell this thing is. So that's got to go down like that. That engages 5th gear. And then down and counterclockwise puts it in another gear. Look at that, bound up. Pretty cool. Oh, I guess I don't need these tools. Time for some T60 Torx action. And just for good practice, good measure, I always heat bolts up before I pull them off, because when you heat things up, not only do they expand, it also breaks chemical bonds that could be holding them together. So, propane torch, don't try this at home. Just gonna get a little heat on it. Actually, I encourage you to try this at home. Let's see what happens. Don't mind the ghetto engine stand. Gotta get it turned far enough. There it goes. Oh, man, those things aren't really that tight. That's surprising. Felt like it only had maybe 75 pounds of torque on it. I don't know what the manual says to torque them to, but that's just my gut instinct. Feels like 75. All right. Cool. Okay, so these bolts are shouldered. It looks like the Belleville washer indexes. Pretty cool. Kind of dirty behind that washer. See if they're the same. Don't want to get them mixed up if they're different. Okay, they are identical. Very good. No need to worry about which goes where. Well, wouldn't you know it, I don't have a 2-jaw puller. I'm going to see what happens if I use tire irons to get this gear off. Somebody else did it before. I don't see why I can't. I don't really give a damn either, because I have a new fifth gear coming. I have a 658 fifth gear. So if I break this one all to shit, oh well, I got another one. Actually, I have quite a few of these, but we won't go into that. Alright, let's see if I can get this thing off of here. Alright, I sprinkled a little drop of water on top of the gear back here. And it disappeared, of course. Get more water. And I'm going to heat it up to 212. See if it works. Tire irons or tire spoons. These are not the cheap ones. Of course that was going to happen. Wow. Okay, so... Ooh. That slid right off. Yeah, so... If you're fretting about what kind of puller to get and spend all this money for whatever, don't worry about it. Just heat the damn thing up and it'll slide right off. Amazing. So yeah, make sure the keeper and these little things are still on there, because that would be bad if they got separated, because I really don't know how they go back on, nor do I care to find out. So this is the fifth gear sleeve. And then fifth gear synchro ring, fifth gear. Ooh, and that thing is kind of warm. Slid right off. So there's a needle bearing in there. It looks like it might be plastic. So good idea not to get it too hot. I'm gonna go lay all this stuff out on a table later. Make sure everything's in the right spot. Now we get to play with this little gear. You know, this transmission's not in too bad shape for 260,000 miles minus the synchro issue. Alright, let's see if this little puller thing I bought from the auto parts store works. It's kind of hokey. You know what? It's actually moving on its own. I guess I don't need a puller for that. Wow. Okay. Well, I'm going to take that puller back and get my $25 back. Cool. Alright. Well, that's as far as I'm going to go for now. I guess the rest of it'll come later, but you'll see me split the case, and this is going to be a whole drawn-out affair. So that went well. So in conclusion, for the fifth gear, seems like I didn't need a puller for either of the gears. All I had to do is heat them up and they fell right off. All the bolts are fairly low torque, so you don't need to go wrenching on it or use air tools or anything like that. So yeah, get out there and do it. And we'll cut to the next scene. I don't know what it's going to be, but let's find out. Next step in the Bentley is to remove two bolts for the reverse gear shaft something. Let me get that right. Okay. So we're going to remove two bolts for the reverse gear shaft support. One of them is deep inside the case, and I'm using a T40 bit. Yeah, T40 bit. I think it might be some weird hex, but I can't really see because it's full of oil. So let me see what happens here. Okay, that's not too bad. go grab a magnet. I got this little tiny magnet I just stuck on the end of the bit. Works pretty good for this kind of stuff. Okay. Oh, it is a T40. Good. It looked like a hex from the inside there, but it's actually it's a T40. Cool. I'm going to stick the magnet over here for later. And the other one is a T45, and it's on the bottom of the case, almost in line with that other bolt. Uh-oh, rolling away. Real professional, huh? So that bolt was underneath the gear selector tower base with the Volkswagen cast into it, so it says VW on it. And it's this kind of rounded, shouldered bolt thing, T45. So the reverse gear shaft support is now loose, which means I could take, I think, the flanges, the axle flanges off, and then split the case. But before we do that, the next step was to take this off, which I've already removed the 2 bolts. Put it in neutral. Bentley manual says put it in neutral, and then yank it out. I'm going to go set this aside. I've got a whole pile of these, so I'm going to make one that is acceptable. This one's not in too bad of shape. Yeah. Okay. Next step. It wants me to remove the cover plate, which is that cast Volkswagen guide on the bottom of the transmission. It's a guide for the shifter assembly. And the 2 bolts next to it that hold those weird little tab things on. So it looks like that's all of the bolts on the bottom of the transmission that are facing down. All of them need to come off. And it looks like another set of T45s and some 13 millimeters. I'll go ahead and do those real quick. Some 3/8 drives. Yep, that's the trick. Of course, it makes a mess in my driveway. Cool. Come back. It's fun having a slanted driveway. So what I just took off is the shifter guide on the bottom, and this one's got a Volkswagen cast into it. How pretty. In the pile it goes. So that step's done. I'm going to turn the camera off and figure out what to do next. Alright. Had to move a little over on the driveway since it was getting kind of harsh lighting. So let's move on. I'm using an external mic, so I don't even know where to put this thing. I guess I could put it in my pocket. I don't know. Let's see if it works. Yeah, there. You're in my pocket. Alright, so the next step is... Oh, you know, I forgot to remove those pivot pins on the bottom. Actually, I took one out. The other one's kind of stuck, so I'm going to use a pair of pliers and try to get that bastard out. There. Pivot pin. Get my parts bin back. Okay, so those are done. Next is, I'm trying to look on the page here. There's a lot of pictures on this page. Now it wants me to remove the left side axle flange, which would be the driver's side axle flange. Let's see what it looks like. That looks like a 6mm hex. Yay, it worked. So I just used just some random tool to counter the torque I was applying. Cool. And wow, this thing is in excellent shape. The ones I took out of my 02C were destroyed, and the ones I took out of my other 02A, the journal, the bearing journal here was scored up really bad from just wear and tear, and it looks like the seal surface is actually in really good shape, so I'm happy about that. I will use these if they fit in my 02C. I am installing a Pelican diff in my 02C, so this is going to be a lot of fun. Mainly what I need out of this transmission is the final drive, because my final drive was completely destroyed, and so was the first gear, and the second gear synchro was pretty gnarly. If I get those torn apart, I'll show those on camera whenever I'm doing all this on the bench. But just bear with me, this is the dirty part. Everything's nasty. I'm doing it outside because I don't want to get shit all over my garage, of course. Okay, so that's done. I believe the next step is actually to split the case. So I'm going to get the air going, because there's no way in hell I'm doing this by hand. There is 1,000,000 bolts on here. So, yeah, I'll go ahead and buzz all those off. Alright, back at it in a new location. I'm going to put the microphone right there. So, what I've done is I removed all of these bolts from the case, inside and out. So now the two halves are not mechanically attached, so hopefully they'll come apart. But I couldn't find anywhere about these other pivot pins on top of the transmission to remove or leave them in, but it looks like they're attached to the shifting linkage, just like the ones on the bottom, so probably a good idea to take them out. I'm going to go ahead and do that. There are O-rings on these, by the way, so make sure when you take these out, you replace that little O-ring right there. Especially on the bottom of the transmission, because they'll just leak everywhere. So when I did that, the shift linkage inside fell down to the end of its travel. I could see, I see how there was a tutorial on Vortex about getting all this crap aligned, and I could see why. It doesn't look too bad. Alright, now the funnest part. Trying to get this case separated. I really don't know how to go about doing this. Apparently there is a special tool that Volkswagen had specifically for splitting cases. All I have is this crappy Harbor Freight whatever plastic mallet, so I'm just gonna start beating on it and see what happens. Like I said earlier, I don't care about this case, so if I break something, yeah, whatever. I just need the gears out of it. Yeah, it's not gonna work. Yeah, that's not gonna work. I gotta figure this out. All right. Well, I looked on Vortex, and there is no trick to this, so I got my BFH and a piece of wood, and hopefully this works. So you're gonna follow along while I do this. I've never done this before. All right, move the microphone. Get the book out of the way. hood is falling apart. Bah. Okay, so the case just split very slightly. So I think that's all it takes is just a couple big whacks with a BFH and a piece of wood. In case you don't know what that means, big fucking hammer, right? Cool. My microphone is my paper towel roll, so you have to bear with me on that one. Cool. Looks like it split pretty even all the way around. Might need a little more persuasion than what I just did. There it goes. So it makes an audible thump whenever it fully splits. So at this point I should be able to just lift off the back of the transmission. Ah, yeah, that's nice. Yay. Alright, I'm just going to keep this rolling. So I got the thread on Vortex pulled up on my phone here, since the Bentley manual goes kind of vague right here. So after I split the case, it says, remove the selectors from the input and output shaft. The long tab goes towards the top. Okay. Well, it's just kind of sitting in there, so it shouldn't be hard to take off. I see. Yeah, so for this part, I highly recommend just looking at it and seeing where everything goes. That way you can put it back together. Actually, I'm going to just try to put it back together just to see if I can. Okay, so once you play around with that a little while, it really starts to make sense. So I'm going to remove the shifter linkage assembly and put it in my gasoline bucket. The only use for gasoline I found around my house is washing diesel parts. If there's another use for gasoline out there, just let me know. Alright. Get a clean finger before I go messing with the phone here. Next is remove the single bolt from the reverse gear selector shaft. It's a T45 or triple square. My notes were not clear. Okay, so that's this bolt right here. And I'm going to say that's a T45 because that's what I've got chucked up here. So hopefully it is. Oh, look at that. It is. How about that? T45. Thing was kind of tight. Then remove the reverse gear support from the selector shaft. This thing's got a spring behind it. So it kind of just cradles this reverse gear and slides it up and down to engage it or disengage it. Oops. So And see, it's got this spring on it with this little metal or plastic ball on the bottom. But it just works against that spring, and that's what keeps it working. Actually, I'm going to leave that up here. I don't want to lose bits of it. Okay, now it says work out the reverse gear selector and the reverse gear shaft. So I presume this is the selector. Oh, I see what they mean by work it out. This shaft, this gear is in the way. So if I move it over a little bit, then I can pop the whole thing out. I like to keep it all together so I don't lose it. Alright, so I saw this on one of my other cases. There's this really cool internal needle bearing with a facing needle bearing on it. And I thought that was just the coolest little bearing. Something's been rubbing some aluminum off right there. Just a little bit, but whatever. Cool. Well, now that I got it down to this portion, these transmissions are not that complex. This is pretty cool. Gosh, I was wanting to take the whole thing apart and put new synchros in it, but everything looks really good on this transmission. You know, the bearing journals are still mirror finish. Even the bearings look good. Cool. But we'll see. Maybe I'll take it apart because I really want to be able to do this all the way out. I want to be able to take all the gears off, you know, change the needle bearings in there, change synchros, change gears if I need to. Don't want to leave any leaf unturned on this project. Alright, cool. Well, anyway, next, no more babbling. Next, remove the 4 nuts holding the output shaft on the case. Well, shit, those are underneath, so I gotta flip this thing on its side again. I'm going to put this case somewhere else. Lay it on my stack of cases over there. Hopefully all this shit doesn't fall out. Yeah, we'll see what happens. Everything's trying to fall out. Yeah, the differential's trying to fall out. Don't fall out. Okay. More 13mm. Cool. Now it says you will now be able to wiggle out the input shaft. Okay, so this is the input shaft. This one right here. Cool, an input shaft. And then this is the output shaft assembly. And now I got to figure out how to take all this apart. So that'll be another episode or whatever. Oh yeah, differential. Of course, it's just sitting in there. Cool. All right, I'm gonna get all this stuff cleaned up, and we'll go through how to pull the gear stacks apart. So, see you on the next one.